night second place finisher. Plenty of fans here, Brett, and a solid second place finish.
Yeah, I got to shout out the Turn 2 Terribles over there. They're all a bunch of good guys to hang out with, talk to. I really like them.
What's going on? Turn 2 Terribles. We back. We had a little bit of a break. Jimmy here with Jay-Z and Chris. We got some special guests today. Kyle Keene and Brett Strickler. We're going to be bringing those guys on. That's pretty much mostly what we're going to talk about today. Just be talking with those guys. But we back. We've been gone for a little bit, but we got a lot of good, exciting things lined up here, and this is the beginning of it. We'll eventually have a show where we catch up on some of the things that we missed over maybe the past 3-4 weeks or so, but we'll probably just hit on them a little bit tonight. So, guys, how you guys doing? Good to see you
Doing
again.
good, man. We're ready to go. Glad we're back. Gonna have a great few weeks here coming up. We have some awesome guests lined up, and I think episode 1 of our guest type sessions here is going to be pretty fire. We have some local PA guys up and coming here in 410, 358 division, and more to come after this. So if you like this one, a little shorter form here. We're going to keep it on point and not go quite off the rails like we typically do. Well, maybe a little, but it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a good time, and try to catch up with some of these guys in the off season, see how it's going, and where they've been, where they're going.
Chris, how you doing, man?
Pretty good. Glad to be back. Excited for this one. These some characters here.
Yeah, we'll be. Of course, this is live right now, so all you guys watching, don't be afraid to be throwing your comments and questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them all as we're talking to these guys, and then we'll be uploading this Spotify and all over as well for you guys. So let's bring our first guest on today, 358 driver, Mr. Kyle Keene.
Hey, what's
Welcome,
going on,
Kyle.
fellas?
Hey, Kyle,
doing?
what's going on, buddy?
Howdy, fellas.
I keep updating Twitter to see if the high limit schedule was announced yet. So as everybody's following along here tonight, we're going to be kind of keeping up with that a little bit. And if you all see it posted, let us know. We're going to try to talk about that a little bit tonight. Not sure where and when, but we're going to try to throw that in here. Oh, you got some fans in the chat. Let's go. Dakota, shouting them out already.
Dakota Coon, let's go, dude. My favorite crew chief, probably.
So welcome to the Turn 2 Terribles, Kyle. I know you are familiar with all of us in this chat, and we all know you pretty well. But there's some fans out there that are new to this podcast, and it's been a quiet off season a little bit for you, and we wanted to get you on here first for sure, as being a good friend of ours and of the show, and a lot of our group on iRacing and in real life. We just want to catch up with you a little bit and get to know you a little. So I think if we can start, tell us a little bit about your background. I know the Keene name is a name that we all know here in Central PA, and you've done a good job marketing yourself and kind of a little bit of your story, and you have actually a really good website. I know it's probably ready to be updated, but it tells a good story about your team and yourself and your family history. But tell us a little bit about your history in Central PA racing.
Unfortunately, it's very boring and not very long. But outside of me racing personally, I was too young to really work on a race car when my dad was racing, so I don't have a a lot of memories at the track, but not necessarily like knowing anything about the cars. And when my grandpa got into racing, I was a sophomore, junior in high school, so I had an idea of what was going on, but definitely didn't know how to work on any of the cars or anything like that. Started helping like mountain tires, drilling holes for bumpers, things like that. Really small things. Um, and then when he passed away, kind of got out of it for really a long time, and didn't really wasn't really involved. Didn't really have a team I hung out with, nothing like that. Didn't really have a lot of friends. Um, obviously I had college, and then I got out of college and worked right away. So, um, racing really wasn't necessarily on the immediate future for me. Um, and I was a dual sport athlete in high school, and I had plans going into college to play football. So once I got out of college, I decided after iRacing for 2 years with Jeremy that this was probably something that I wanted to try because I had been around it my entire life. So I talked to my dad because everybody knows with my family history, my dad raced and raced 410 for I don't know 5 or 6 years, and we came up with a game plan. Went and bought a used 305 Mach 1 chassis up in New York, race day motor, and we started spinning laps. My first race, Death Valley. I think I got 15 laps in, and I hit somebody and flopped over. So, wasn't sure if that's necessarily going to be my thing, but we kept the nose down, kept grinding, and eventually started making features, and then moving forward to features, middle of the end of my first season. Second season came out really strong with a third at Roaring Knob, I think. And then backed that up at Selinsgrove, was running second to Doug Dodson, I think. We had a restart with like 3 to go. I was pretty sure I was going to win. I just felt really good, and my rider tire gave out, so that was like pretty deflating. And then I kind of had like a mediocre year the rest of that year, top 10s, top 5s, things like that, but nothing really to write home about. Then I decided to take a year off. Racing's expensive, and I wasn't sure if it was something that I wanted to keep doing, especially with the career path I had chosen at the time. So took a year off. I just helped my buddy Kenny Hefner with his 305 and try to learn more about how the cars work, how the shocks go together, what's square in the car, just everything, any possible thing you can think of. So took that year. First couple of races we started off kind of rough. It was just trying to figure out what Kenny liked, what the car liked, what I felt was right. Bouncing things off people, and we started having more speed through the year, and it just kept getting building and building and building. And then at the end of the year, when the 305s were there with the Outlaws, we finally got our first win. So that was a really cool first win. We passed some really good race cars to get that win, so it was definitely hard worked for. Kenny had probably thrown away 3 or 4 wins, but he was just as new as I was, and we worked really hard together, and it was very gratifying. And to get my first win, no matter if it was in the car or out of the car, something like that is something you can't ever take away, especially the work that we put in. So shout out to my buddy Kenny. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I want to race again. I miss it too much. I'm tired of watching. It sucks. And especially after you've driven one, and the hype you get is unreal, especially when you're going, I don't know what the 358's good to go, probably 120 into the corner. And you get that rush, and it just buries you in the seat. And it's unlike anything you'll ever feel in your life. And after that, decided it was time to go 358 racing. We had talked about it at the end of my second year. Definitely didn't feel like I was ready for a 410. Wanted to get some more seat time. Still do, obviously. So next year, we're just going to keep banging away at the 358s.
So I want to go back just a little bit here to that win with Kenny. That night was an eventful night for a lot of people. And a lot of people surrounding you and this group in this little chat here.
Just general
Yeah.
vicinity.
So I'll let these guys get into some of the shenanigans, but one of the things I'll remember from that night of many, one of them was your dad running down through the at Port Royal where, the pits are out of turn 4 and they come down to the access road to the victory lane, your dad running to victory lane.
Yeah.
Now, like I know that meant a lot to you, and I know what it meant to Kenny. But to see your dad that excited from like a distance, even right, like
Yeah.
that really like it really kind of not hit home for me, but it really like showed me like, man, like this is why people these we do what we do, and you
Yeah.
guys do what you do. I'm just a fan, but like that really kind of like showed a lot to me, the passion and how much you guys put into it, and blood, sweat, tears, and emotion and time like that really stood out to me that night. And not to be too much of a serious note, but man, I was so proud to see you guys there and accomplish that together as a group, and from where you started that year to where you went, and Kenny's success, and I
Yep.
know we talked about it. Kenny, not that he struggled, but he wasn't a contender in a lot of races previous to that year, and the amount of growth he did throughout that year together with you learning and him driving was pretty neat to watch, from a spectator's standpoint. And uh, I can't imagine you not wanting to race after that. Like
Yeah.
I know you
Yeah.
enough that competitive spirit of like, man, I want that feeling of
Yep.
being in that driver's seat and getting out of that car as a winner anywhere, right?
Yep.
So
Yep. No,
that
you're
was a really
absolutely
cool
right.
moment for me watching that night, watching your dad run, because we were standing. I think I don't think I was in victory lane, but I was standing at the fence there at Port Royal behind, and you could see him running down, and just the happiest. I mean, and listen, it wasn't even you, right? You were helping out Kenny, and Kenny was driving the damn thing. So
Yep.
that was
Yep.
really cool.
Yeah. No, it's something like my dad and I are so competitive, and we show it in different ways. He's maybe a little more emotional than I am about how I want to win. But like either way, we both have that passion. And we want to win really bad, and we want to show up every week and we want to win, even though it's not necessarily, you're not going to win every week. We certainly show up and want to win. If you don't, I don't know why you're racing. But
Right.
um, you know, we worked so hard all year and struggled to and had so many phone calls. Kenny and I were talking several nights a week, trying to understand how to get faster. And every week we just kept pushing and pushing and pushing. And to kind of bounce off of the one side of it, Jeremy, where we talked about like the passion and the emotion that you have with racing. You and I talk a lot about like the mental side of things. And for Kenny, I felt like it was really good to stay balanced myself, because when he would make a mistake, like he spun out with probably two to go leading at Path Valley. And I mean, like, he was by far hand over fist the fastest car on the racetrack. And he just spun out. And it was a mistake on him, and he was so upset. And instead of being pissed off and throwing wrenches and this and that and the other, I was like, Kenny, it's all right. Now you know what you did. Now let's move on to next week. Let's see if we can win next week now. Instead of trying to make it a negative, let's build on that. Like, hey guys, you led 18 laps, dude.
Yeah.
Let's finish it off with two more, and we're right there. So the mental side of this is extremely hard on you, especially as a driver. And my dad and Brent helped set up the race car, but I'd make the end call on most of my stuff. And it always makes you sit there and question, like, hey, man, am I ever going to get this? Am I doing the right things? Like, am I ever just going to win? You get close, or you start finding speed and then you drop off. There's just so many things, and in the competition at 358s is ridiculous. So if you're not on your A game when you roll out of the trailer, you're going to struggle all night long, because you're racing against guys like Frankie Herr, who's been racing for 25 or 30 years. Tyler Brem, Brett Strickler, all these guys have a lot of seat time at these tracks. So you have to bring it every week from hot laps on. And it can be a struggle sometimes, and it really drains you, and it makes you question it sometimes. But at the end of the day, when you have a good run, it just brings everything back up again. And you want to get back right back after the next week.
Yeah, and that those ups and downs are something that I've experienced with you, and got to really see with a lot of guys a little closer. Getting to the photography thing has really brought me a little closer to the pit area than I've ever been as a fan. And from sitting in the stands as a fan, and it's easy to not get invested in people's emotions of it, and it's just like, hey, good night, bad night, moving on. Let's go see these guys next week. Really getting close to you, and again, you and I have talked a lot about the mental side of this, and at the end of the day, none of us are paying our bills from it, right? But we're
Right.
passionate, we're competitive, we want to win every time we race on the track. But then there's also an expectation of setting expectations of realistic ones, right?
Yep.
To think
Yep.
you're going to go out and win every race you enter in a race car is unrealistic. That does not happen. I don't care who you are, it doesn't happen. This isn't like a quarterback that has won every game in high school and college, right?
Yep.
This isn't that. This isn't how that works. This is a team sport, but it doesn't. It just doesn't work that way. So, I think those ups and downs are something that I know you've learned a lot about, and I know that being on the crew chief side of it with a driver and learning, saying, hey, I know how I'd want to feel after I got out, knowing no one can tell me I made a bigger mistake than myself.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell me I screwed this up because I don't know that, right? So, I think it's different. You're more mature, you're a little bit older, you're not 16, 17 years old and having to get a scolding, right? So I think where you're at with that
We still
where do you balance where do you balance that, like, hey, I know I've talked to you about this and managing expectations on, yeah, we want to win every race, but to think that even at 305 division, that's a great division. That's a very competitive division.
Extremely competitive.
So, and that's hard to win races, right? How do you balance that, managing expectations and managing and wanting to win so bad? How do you do that for yourself?
I don't do that very well. I think part of it for me is, and my whole crew and everybody that supports me in general is, like, I don't really have that much time in the seat at all. I've maybe had 30, 35, 305 races before I hopped in a 358, and before that I had nothing. And like my first night.
Back up. Zero. Never raced a race car.
Right,
Never raced in a race
to the
car.
point
So-
of you were
so
racing
0 to a
iRacing
305.
with Jeremy. You were
Yeah.
iRacing
Right.
with Jeremy, and you thought it was going to strap into a race car.
I was Jeremy and then bought a 305. And then
At least he's doing it.
So
So,
my
like,
question
thanks,
is, why
Kyle.
doesn't Jeremy have a 305?
Did you see I had to turn my camera off, that kid that came in here a minute ago? Yeah. That's why.
actually, your 305 is sitting in probably a camera bag somewhere. So
You're,
It's not wrong.
it's
You
pretty
got
close.
him. You got him.
But I think my struggle is, for me personally, I caught on to the driving side pretty fast. Not necessarily what I wanted to feel or knew what I was feeling, but like understanding how to race and where to be, not necessarily on the track, but just racing people. I felt like I picked that up really fast. And then I've always had decent speed. It's not just been killer speed. So I want to work on getting faster more consistently. There's times where I'm like, whoa, we'll have a night at the Grove, like, you're like, holy smokes, like, he looked really good. I was like, my first night at the Grove, I was running 7th. My first night ever at the race at Williams Grove in a 358. And that builds me up, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, I need to do this every week now.
I was pumped that night.
Yeah, you guys were there. And so it builds yourself up. You're like, okay, next week I'm gonna top 5, and then next week you barely make the feature, and it's
Right.
like,
or part breaks, or
or
your
part
car
breaks,
doesn't
or-
start, or yeah, right.
right. So to me, I struggle with balancing my expectations versus where I should actually be. I may be ahead of the curve. I don't really know, but to me, I feel like I'm behind. So I'm always pushing myself harder and harder every week, and sometimes, back to the mental thing, it's straining, and it's not necessarily realistic expectations that I have for myself. But does any racer really ever have realistic expectations?
I
don't
hope
know.
not, right? I hope not. But it's the times when it doesn't go the way you plan, and it's the times when things don't go to meet your expectation in your head, that you don't let it snowball into the next week, right?
Right.
It's literally forgetting about the last play, the last race, the last weekend, and going, okay, I know what I can do. I know what our potential is. I'm going to put everything into this week and not carry anything from the week before, right?
Yep.
And if you do all your stuff at the shop that week, and I know you're very particular about your shop work and your maintenance, and if that's all done, the mental stuff is left last weekend, because none of that matters, right? It could be a different track. It's literally a different racetrack, Lincoln, Williams Grove, wherever. Different conditions, different cars, different pill draw. Hopefully you ever get a good one, whatever the case may be. So, that recover from leaving it behind and moving forward it can be tough, right? Because it can be a long season, right?
Yep.
So this past season, followed along, had some good nights, right? Had some nights where it was encouraging, had some nights where you're like, holy crap, this is starting off from the back when you pull, pill number 100 out of 100, right? So those can be tough nights where you have speed, but you can't pass cars, whatever the case may be. So how do you evaluate your 358 first season, the ups, the downs, the what? And I know you said about consistency and have a more consistent speed, but what is it going to take to get that?
I think first year I was on track. I wouldn't say I'm behind or I'm ahead. I think I'm probably right where I needed to be. Um, you know, there's a lot of things that we brought over from the 305 side that didn't work in 358s. You know, air pressures, where your wing angle needs to be, wheel spacing, stagger. These things have more power, so you know that plays a different factor on the race car how they react. Um, you know, just a lot of like very little things that we work. Shocks are huge. You know, had to really get those dialed in, especially across the rear of my race car. Um, you know, torsion bars, weights, you know, scaling the race car, things like that. Shout out Dakota Kuhn, helped me scale my race car for the first time. You know, I've had a lot of really good people support me in my first year that have a lot of experience. And it did push me towards the end of the season to find like a little bit more of a consistent speed. It's just it needs to happen from the first lap of the first heat race to the last lap of the feature. You know, I have to get through the whole night. Um, so I'm pretty satisfied with my first year. That division, especially at Lincoln, even Williams Grove, you know, those guys have spun so many laps there. You can't make a mistake. You know, Doug Handmaker is going to blow by you like you're tied to a fence post. If you run the top and you should be running the bottom, he's gone. You know, things like that. So you got to know where to be racing on the track, especially. That's really important, and making sure your car is on point.
Right.
Jimmy, what do you got?
Well, I had a question. Or I had a
Chris.
couple questions.
Yep.
Yeah.
So one, I guess my first question would be, Kyle, like how much of taking that year off to be a crew chief do you think that's helped you on the driver's side this past year? Well, and where you're supposed to be on the track and what you needed out of the car. Has it helped you and in which ways?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's helped me a ton. It's helped me understand in a couple of different ways. The first way is even just watching the race car on the racetrack. Like I knew what was in Kenny's car when I was watching it. So when he would enter the corner and it was doing something that I didn't like or he didn't feel like felt right to him, but okay, you know, I think this is where we need to be. So then I go out, you know, make a change. It would get better, get worse, and then you know we would just counteract that. So that carried over to like me driving, where I got an understanding of what something should feel like, what just based on Kenny's input and what I saw. So I'm combining the two, and I'm like, okay, you know, the car was too hard on the right rear on the exit of the corner or the middle of the corner. You know, maybe I need to do something on the right rear of the car. You know, things like that. That was probably number one. Number two was just how the cars work in general and shocks. I learned a lot about shock numbers, the differences in like motor weights, for example, between a 358 and a 305, you know, affect your shocks dramatically and how the car reacts. So, you know, you have to understand the way the race car works with what's underneath the hood. And that requires different things, you know, different blocks, the whole nine yards. So, the other big thing I noticed, and this is coming from 305s, was the difference in right rear tires. So the H15 tire that 410 sprint cars, 360s, 305s around this or 358s run around this area are super sticky, like on the racetrack. Like they really grab hard. And I wasn't used to that when I got in a 358 because 305 tires don't seem like they do that quite as much. And I'm not sure how to explain it. It's kind of a feel thing, but I definitely noticed that the H15 versus the Race Saver, and even that and the sidewalls. So like the sidewall reacts differently on an H15 than a Race Saver. So you know you got to counteract with that too. You know, tires are a spring, so it's all in the whole thing wraps together. So to answer your question, like there's a lot of things I learned. It's just employing them in the right way
At the right
and making
time.
that combination. So yeah, at the right time. So I learned a ton, and I understand race cars so much better than I did before the season I helped Kenny. And it's only benefited me continually into this past year and going into this year.
Which one? I guess the second question kind of a little bit connected. You said iRacing is where you started with Jeremy, and so how much did that help you? You said you kind of felt like you naturally picked up the driving side rather quick. Was you think the racing line part was that something iRacing, or is it just completely not even relevant?
I think iRacing is relevant. I don't think it's relevant as far as feel,
Right.
but I do think it's relevant in terms of racecraft. So like, understanding, how to slide somebody or how to get underneath somebody or go around the top. The racing lines are kind of messed up on iRacing as far as top, bottom, middle, where to race. The slick's different. The slick on iRacing is like way slicker than like a real life slick, if that makes sense.
Right.
But I think overall iRacing is really good. I think you're gonna, if you're trying to learn to race, it's really good. I think if you're just trying to hone your skill on racing others, I think it's good. I don't think it's good for like throttle control, braking,
No,
things like
right.
that. Yeah.
And I kind of, that's kind of what I was thinking. You said just around racing people, you said you felt like it was more natural, and I was wondering if that's maybe why. And the last thing I had was, you said you went to college. What'd you go to school for? What was your career path that you went down to try to
I was
do?
a good old business major.
There you go. Hey,
So,
that pays off. That pays off.
It did.
Sometimes.
Business management. Did 4 years of beer drinking, and
That's pretty T2
I've
to do.
had a couple of very good jobs. So it's paid off. Can't complain.
Awesome, Jimmy. I don't know what you have.
Well, I think we kind of harped on it a lot already, but I did want to make a point. Like, definitely all three divisions of sprint cars around here, they're tough. They're probably the best in the world when you talk about locally and how good it is from top to bottom. You think that is something that has helped since you are racing at the best, or is it something that maybe can get you down sometimes? You kind of touched on that already, but just a level of competition, does that help you? Maybe that with you being able to jump in so quickly and kind of feel like we're a little bit ahead of the game. Is that giving you a lot of confidence going into the future?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start by touching on the 305 stuff, competition level, for example. I mean, when you show up to Port Royal in a 305 race and you got 50 or 60 race cars that you're trying to make the feature, it's ridiculous. I mean, the 305s, I would highly recommend anybody, if you're trying to get into sprint car racing, or if you just want to race, or you're trying to climb the ladder, to start in a 305. I really do think that it's an extremely good class. Even if you want to stay there and just race, you're going to have great racing every night. It's a great division. Same with 358s, 360s. The competition levels, these guys are so dialed in, and especially the guys that have a lot of seat time and have been racing for a while. Even 410s, obviously everybody knows they're ridiculous. But
right.
The competition level does push you. Like, you get up in the seat, like if you're starting in the second row and you have like Frankie Her on your outside, Doug Haymaker's on the front row, and Justin Foster's on the pole, like you're like, okay, I gotta go like right now, or I may fall backwards. So there's no playing around. Like, you have to go.
Is there something what was your favorite race from this past season? What was like the biggest highlight that you took away and you keep looking back on and be like, that's it right there?
That's a good one. I probably have two. My favorite one, just because we had some success, was probably at Port Royal when we went up in a race with the URC 360s. I didn't have a very good heat race. I kind of missed the setup a little bit. The car was like sitting on top of the track.
You charged her that field.
Yeah, and we kind of made some changes for the feature, and I was unhappy with the car, but it was fast. So like, take it with a grain of salt, But like, I wanted to be more left, obviously, but like I felt we were hard right, but it was fast. And like,
you were hard right, buddy. I remember watching you through the corner going, oh, he's got to be pissed trying to drive this thing at the first like 6-8 laps, and then I'm like, well, wait, he's passing some cars here.
Yeah.
Like, hold on a minute. And then by the end of it, it was still right, but it wasn't nearly as hard right. But those first few laps, I'm like, oh, he's going to be pissed.
It was like like lifted
Oh.
my front in the air.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, uh oh, we're in trouble. But yeah, like and that's another thing that's taught me like necessarily. And it's something like when I got out of the car that night, I told my dad and Brent like, I'm proud of myself tonight because I learned to drive through a race with a race car I wasn't satisfied with, and still like try to like move forward.
Yeah.
Instead of just
Yeah.
being like, oh fuck, screw it, like this race is over with.
Right.
So I was proud of myself that night, but that was probably my favorite race just because we went like 18th or 16th. I think I was up to 7th, and then we ran out of fuel.
6th, 7th,
Yeah.
yeah. And I
Yeah,
look
but you
at
were passing cars, man. It was
That night
awesome
was
to watch.
brutal to go
Well,
to
and
pits.
it was a long evening, and that 6th or 7th, by the way, I look back and I look at the cars that were in front of you. Those were
Just
guys
stacked.
in URC division that dominated that division all season. There were some really good race cars right there that you were running with. So I agree that I forgot about that race, but I agree. I'd like to hear your second one too.
I forgot
Yeah.
about that race until he mentioned out of gas. Like, I remember us all being
Yeah.
so deflated in the infield.
Oh,
like,
I thought it blew up. I was
right,
like,
we thought
oh,
it was the worst.
no.
It was like, no, like the whole turn 2 vicinity was just sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we were going wild before that. We're watching
Right.
them come up through the field. We're like, let's go, let's
Yeah,
go.
and then just probably almost the only person that was probably more sad than us was probably Kyle. But yeah, the second
Yeah.
race, I want to hear about that.
And I will say, like the finish on the port thing, like we lined up for the last restart, and like I saw like Jason Schultz in front of me, Mark Smith, Lenny Thompson, like all these guys that I've watched, especially Mark Smith. Like to even see Mark Smith even in my vicinity, I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like,
Like,
this is so cool. Even Jason Schultz. I mean, like I've watched these guys for so long,
Right.
and that was really cool. That was like a really touching moment. But my second race was probably my first race at Williams Grove. Not Dakota. Brett and I lined up side by side that night, 11th and 12th. Cause we made the redraw, and of course we redrew 11th and 12th. So I'm like,
Of course.
what are the chances of that? But so I got up to like 7th or something like that, and I was running really good, and I felt really good, and I was having a really good night. I had a decent heat race. I think I passed. Actually, I started 6th in my heat. I ran up to 4th and made a 4th turn, last second pass for the redraw spot. So that was really cool. And got up to 7th, and then I made a rookie mistake and shoved it in the inside wall in turn 1, and bent my front axle and spun out and made myself look like an idiot in front of everybody. But you're gonna have those moments. And I learned to move up the racetrack on entry into turn 1 at Williams Grove. So hopefully I don't bend too many more front axles after that. But that was probably my second favorite.
You know what's the common denominator in both of those races is that the turn 2 terribles were all there both of those nights.
We were
Hey,
there.
let's
Maybe
go.
we're good luck. Maybe
You guys need
And-
to be there more often.
And just to tie the bow on that little shenanigans story, we were also there the night of the crew chief win.
Yes.
By the way, we were there in body. I don't know about spirit. You
I gave Kyle Keen my last fireball shot that night.
and so did I.
Shots were had.
I gave my last fireballs to him and Kenny.
And I was
pretty sure
carrying Chris out of the pit area.
That may have happened. We may have lost Jimmy. That may have happened. We may have had another guy named Jay-Z asking where his friend Jimmy was. Jay-Z
And I was
may
there
have
the whole time.
signed. Jay-Z may have signed some people that day. So
Oh, I did. Yeah.
it was a good time.
It was a great time.
Allegedly.
Always a good time.
That
When
was
the
fun.
turn 2 terribles are there, Kyle Keen has a good race.
We
That's
go
just-
forward.
it is what it is. You guys go forward and have a good race.
I think we need a sticker.
Ooh.
Ooh.
Hey.
I
Shout
got
out.
you covered.
Turn 2
I
terribles,
got you
let's go.
covered. I got you.
Um, so my favorite race of your season, probably, I thought that port race probably is number 1, but the other one for me is your first Lincoln race. You started up front, you finished inside the top 10. Pretty sure that was the first one, right? Was that 7th, 8th you got, I want to say, back half of the top 10 there?
Yeah.
So you got out of the car kind of dejected, and I was like hyped because I'm like, you know what you just did there? And you're like, I went backwards. I'm like, no, you know what you just did there, right? Like, are you aware of what just happened? And I don't think at the time you weren't very happy with yourself and you weren't very happy with the result, but I think my expectations were not that you were going to do awful or finish 20th or wreck the car, but you held your own against the best in that division on the first time in a 358 at Lincoln Speedway, and that is not easy. That is
Yeah.
not easy to do. So that for me, that was like, man, he's having a good time. Like you may
Yeah.
not have been in the car getting passed by these guys that have a million laps, and have figured these cars out. But I was watching it going, okay, he could do this. Like this, not that I never thought you couldn't, but
I hear you.
like this is legit.
I
You know,
hear
so
you, JC. Selling
for
yourself
me,
out.
for me, that was one of my favorites. If it didn't reach your list, that was one of my favorites for sure. Of like, that's my dude. Like this guy can get this done. So we're getting close on time here. So tell us a little bit about your off season. What are your plans for 2023? And shout out some sponsors, man. You may not have it all lined up yet, but tell me who helps make that thing go round.
Yeah, for 2023, not really sure yet. Kind of waiting for the schedules to come out for the Grove and Lincoln. I'm hoping, we get some Port racing, some Selinsgrove racing, things like that. So we'll see what happens. Not really sure. Work schedule may change a little bit, may hurt my Friday night stuff, but we'll see what happens. It's hard to say, but definitely shout out to Keen Parts, Heisman Racing Fuels, Dustin Lehman Construction, Shetron Auction and Equipment, Dublin Gap Ranch, and Coyle's Lawn Care and Landscaping. Although shout out to Eric Coyle, he's going on the World of Outlaw Tour this year with CJB Motorsports as a tire guy. So he's going to get some road experience this time. So yeah, he came from the Keen shop. So we'll see what happens.
That's
Good stuff, man.
I
Yeah.
saw on social media you're talking about paint scheme stuff. You keeping it or what are you doing? Can't say.
Well, hold on. I got one more shout out.
Oh, all right.
Fine Line Auto Body, Jake Autoball. He's helped me out a ton. He's been there for me since I started in 305 racing. He's been a big help of mine. Wicked Dog Grill and Wicked Cushion, Matt Henninger. Hopefully he's
Saw
still
Matt
watching.
chimed in a little bit ago. I hope
Love
he's
you,
still
Matt.
watching for sure.
Love you, Matt. But as far as scheme, not really sure yet. I know there was a lot of people that really wanted a new scheme,
I really
but
like that scheme though.
yeah, we'll see what happens. I don't know. I'm kind of partial to my current one, just because it's clean and simple and to the point.
Yeah.
But you never know.
I really
There
like
might
that
be-
scheme.
Listen, if there's something new, you might see sneak peeks here or there. I mean, you never know.
We might know a guy, but I do.
You might see something.
I
might
do
be a
like
photo
that scheme
session or
though.
two.
So if it stays that way, I do enjoy that scheme. I saw it up close. I mean, not only at the track, but at the York show last year when you had it there. That was really cool. So
Oh, are you planning to have the car at the show this year?
I'm going to try to. Yeah, we should have it ready. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and shout out to Turn 2 Terribles. I believe you guys were there for my first heat race one at the Grove.
I guarantee you, I was there because I only
Yes.
did
Yep,
one
Chris
race.
was definitely there.
I basically lived there.
So
Well, cheers
Cool
to
guys.
you, my friend. I do want to get to one person in the chat here real quick. Alex Rabbit says, "Come to Bridgeport." Is that maybe something in the future? Or?
I would like to go to Bridgeport. That'd be a lot of fun. Looks like a pretty racy joint, especially for 358s, 360s. So we'll see what happens.
Cool. He would be announcing there, which is shout out to Alex. Good for him. But yeah, that would be awesome. I'm excited to see what you can do next year, and just keep kicking some ass out there.
You know we're
Oh, yeah,
cheering
dude.
for you, buddy.
Heck yeah,
Hey,
man.
good luck to you this year, man. We'll see you around the track for sure, buddy.
Thanks, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kyle. We'll see you.
Thank you, Kyle. We're gonna take a quick break. Just